This episode of Let's Find Out with co-host Diego is brought to you by the Snarly Yow, located at the Needful Things Emporium in Charlestown, West Virginia.
The Snarly Yow, located at the Needful Things Emporium in downtown Charlestown, West Virginia. T-shirts, artwork, cryptid books. The Snarly Yow has it. Snarly coffee, snarly prints, snarly beard care. The Snarly Yow has it. Cryptid spice rubs, cryptid soaps, cryptid candles. The Snarly Yow has it. The Snarly Yow is located at the Needful Things Emporium, 218 West Washington Street, Charlestown, West Virginia. For all your cryptid needs, remember, the Snarly Yow has it. Make sure to tell them co-host Diego sent ya.
Are you curious about the unknown, the unexplainable? Do you find yourself intrigued by the mysterious and paranormal side of our world? Join us on an adventure into the world of inexplicable discoveries and investigations that may someday give us the final answer as to what may be behind the veil of reality. The borders of space and time have opened once again, and transmitting from the mountains of West Virginia, it's time once again for Let's Find Out with Diego. The universe is waiting for you.
The borders of space and time have opened once again and transmitting from the mountains of West Virginia. It's another episode of Let's Find Out with Diego. Thank you for taking this journey with me. On this episode of Let's Find Out, it has been reported that in Tuscaloosa stands one of the most haunted locations in Alabama and maybe the entire United States. A famous mansion built by Dr. John R. Drish back in 1837 after allegedly dying from a fall down the stairs in that very location. It has sparked a haunted history with reports of manifestations and strange occurrences. We will be learning all this plus more. Please welcome to Let's Find Out two of the members of the Drish House staff. My friends, welcome to Let's Find Out. It's a pleasure having you on. This is a very interesting location, a very interesting history.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you tonight.
And for the listeners, Let's Find Out who don't know about the Drish House. So if you don't mind, could you introduce yourselves and what is your position there in the mansion?
Certainly. So I am Nika McCool, and my husband and I own the historic Drish House. We purchased this house in 2014. It had been empty then for about 25 years. So we spent about a year and a half just doing basic renovation work to get everything operable and safe again. And we opened as an event venue in May of 2016.
Hi, I'm DeAnna Hatcher, and I am the event coordinator for the historic Drish House.
Great. And it's interesting because we've been going back and forth in emails, and I will send some pictures, which I'll share with the listeners as well, of the different phases or the different purposes for the mansions from the 1800s to now. So if you don't mind, could you give us each phase of the mansion has gone through, because each time has been a different purpose up until now?
Yeah, I'd be glad to do that. So the Drish House is really a unique place in the South, probably, as you said, in the whole country. And it's had a lot of very, very different manifestations. So in 1837, this house was built as the centerpiece of Monroe Place Plantation, which was a cotton plantation on what was then the outskirts of Tuscaloosa by Dr. John Drish and his second wife, Sarah. They moved in and lived here as their family home with his daughter, Catherine, from his first marriage, and his niece, Helen, as well as, generally speaking, about 40 enslaved people were here on Monroe Place. Dr. Drish was a planter. He was a gentleman architect. He was a builder. He was a member of the state legislature. He owned part of a railroad. He was a Renaissance man, and one of the wealthiest men in West Alabama. I took the census of 1860 and just the real property that the Drishes own that's recorded in the census, just used a simple inflation calculator, and it came out to well over $12 million.
Wow.
Current dollars, right. So he was a very educated man. He was very wealthy and a very prominent citizen. He passed away in 1867, and his wife Sarah lived here as a widow for another 17 years. She died in 1884. Both the Drishes were quite elderly for that time frame. They were both born in 1795. So both of them were quite old people. When we have school groups come, frequent question is, did Dr. Drish fight in the Civil War? I'm like, Dr. Drish's grandsons were in the Civil War. He was well past the age of participating as a soldier. Now, after the Drishes both passed away, the home went through a few more private hands as a private residence. I don't know, DeAnna, you want to show? Can we show you some photos and drawings?
Yes, please.
That's the house in 1905, I think, and that's when it was still a private home. So it was a lovely, stately home. It was built to be the terminus of 23rd Street in Tuscaloosa, and so it was sited well, close to downtown. Beautiful home. The last family that lived here as a private home moved out in 1910. Then the house took a few odd twists and turns. So it became a public school. It was the Jemison School for about 25 years. Alabama had just mandated public education, and municipalities were scrambling for buildings they could make into school buildings. So the Drish House at that time had 8 large rooms, but all of them classroom sized. And so it became a public school. After the school closed down, here we got another picture again to show you. It became an auto parts and wrecking company. So this is a really famous image of the house as Tuscaloosa Auto Parts and Wrecking Company. It was taken by Walker Evans, who's a really famous American photographer of the Depression era, and appeared in his 1938 show at the Museum of Modern Art. It's still there in the permanent collection. And we still dig up auto parts. Like if you go out into the yard to plant something, you come up with all kinds of rusty old springs and strange auto parts. So after that, in 1940, it became Southside Baptist Church. Okay, one last picture. So the church redid some of the inside of the house. They had church services here from 1940 until maybe about 1990. DeAnna and I both have met numerous people who went to church here. They're quite elderly now, so memories vary, but something around 1990. And then it was empty until we bought it.
Amazing. And those pictures, did you get those through the archives, or were they already in the house? You find them somewhere in a trunk or the dresser somewhere?
No, we have found them. So the 1907 picture actually is a postcard, and I have one of the original postcards that a man found in an antique store and sent to me. Tuscaloosa Wrecking Company is in the public domain. If you want to look that up, it is, like I said, a very famous photograph. And the Southside Baptist ones, mostly we have been gifted by people who went to church here.
Wow. No, I mean, it's amazing. When I go, I take my mother and my wife, we go out antiquing, and there's been a couple of times where my mother's bought a painting, and then when she opens the back, just to clean some stuff up, there's a picture there of a building with several people. And, as you start to think, what was going on back in those days, you almost kind of get lost in the picture.
Right.
And thank you for showing me those pictures. They're amazing. I'll show them to the listeners on the YouTube version of the show. Looking at what happened with Dr. John R. Drish, I don't know if I quite trust the information that's out there or not, but apparently it's been reported that he found on the stairs because I think he was drunk that night or something happened, or was it that? Or because sometimes people slander people because it's been a couple hundred years ago already.
So that's a popular sort of myth. I will say historically, I haven't found any evidence for that. Let me give you kind of a slightly different version of what I think might have happened and why we got to that version. Awesome. So Dr. Drish, as I said, was quite elderly. He was in his mid-70s. They had just lived through, the cataclysm of the Civil War. This house was spared in Croxton's raid on Tuscaloosa, mostly because it was so far from downtown. And that seems funny for us to say now, because now it really isn't far from downtown at all. Croxton was just interested in burning university buildings. He didn't really burn any of the private residences. But it would have been something incredibly traumatic, I think, to go through by a man who was already elderly. So he was quite old. I think he had some sort of idea that his health was poor because he redid his will about 3 months prior to his death. And it to me, has the air of someone settling their affairs. As to the drinking, I don't have any evidence during his lifetime that he drank more than his social contemporaries. People in the 19th century tended to drink more heavily than we do now, but he doesn't seem to have been an unusually heavy drinker. But I will say that if he did have some sort of illness, so if you had something that caused chronic pain, cancer, or in the 19th century, really all you had to treat that was laudanum or alcohol, both of which were horribly addictive, and either of which could have led to a fall that would have been fatal. I've never seen any contemporary account that said he died from a fall, but that doesn't surprise me. The stairs are extremely steep. He was old, he was ill. I find it plausible. I just don't think the story about him being a chronic alcoholic, I don't think it could have possibly have been true, and he accomplished all the things that he did. But I do think he might have been treating himself with alcohol or laudanum, or both.
Right, I guess, because there was no better alternatives back then, as you said. With the fall down the stairs, I'm thinking because if somebody reaches a certain age, even today, anybody who falls down the stairs, it's going to be pretty deadly. With or without medication, you're looking at not so good chances.
Right, yeah, correct. And like I said, I do think because he redid his will shortly before his death that, he as a doctor may have been aware that he had some sort of illness.
Now, with the history of the mansion and the location, of course, I read that it inspired a book, and I'm embarrassed I didn't write down the name of the author, and I have not read the book, but it's called 13 Alabama Ghosts and Jeffrey, right?
Yes, it's
I almost said Jeremy. I almost screwed the whole thing. Yeah. So, with you being there as long as you have any of you personally experienced anything? What's been happening there, and what has been your experience thus far?
Oh yeah, we experience things all the time. DeAnna, you want to tell your story about the photograph, or you want to tell something that's been happening lately?
So I sent you the photograph of me and my mom in front of the Drish House. That was in 2016 when we did a ghost tour, before I even started working here. I just came for the ghost tour because we love ghost stories and stuff. And we've always been super interested in the Drish House because I'm from Tuscaloosa. So when they restored it, I was so anxious to get inside. But we took multiple pictures out in front of the house that night. After everyone was done, I stayed and talked to Nika the whole time. And in one of them, you can see a face in the window. And it looks like a woman, and I think it's Mrs. Drish. And it's so funny because after I started working here, that room that the face was in is like the spookiest room to me.
We both have days, which, for lack of a better terminology, I guess we just call it days you can't come upstairs. And so the way that we found out about this as a staff group, so we're a pretty small business, right? Madison Butler, one of the girls that cleans upstairs, left me a note and said, hey, I'm going to come back in the morning and vacuum upstairs. I just couldn't go upstairs. And then DeAnna and I started talking, and we're like, we also have days when you just can't be upstairs. It's the strangest feeling. It's hard to explain, but you come up. We have a double staircase that then goes into a single staircase to come to the second floor. And when you turn onto that single staircase, sometimes you just get this feeling really strongly that you can't be up here today. Mm-hmm. This is not your day. Doesn't happen often, but when it does, it's very pronounced.
It's just like they don't want you here today. They just need to.
Not today.
Not today. And it's real spooky. And it's funny that it's spooky that way because I don't ever get any spooky vibes. It's always like loving vibes that I get.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we actually think the ghosts are fond of us.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think they harbor any animosity toward the people here. Um, they're sort of doing their thing. We're kind of doing our thing, but they were famous entertainers when they were alive. One of the reasons that we know so much about the Drishes and life at the Drish House before the Civil War is that they entertained frequently. They never had any children of their own. And the guests that they had, fortunately wrote letters so that we kind of know what the Drish's furniture looked like. We know what the daily routine was because of these people who came here as house guests.
And do you think maybe that the fact that they like having you all there is because you're treating the home right? You're not wrecking it. You're not using it for nefarious purposes. You're using it for loving purposes. Obviously, a lot of
Yeah.
weddings and events get booked in your location, correct?
Yes. Yeah, we did 113 events last year.
Oh my goodness.
A lot.
We're very proud of that.
Yeah, we're pretty proud of that.
Which brings the question. I'm sorry to interrupt. There's a little bit of an echo on my part. When you have a couple or whatever event's going to happen there, do they go there because they know of the history? Do they learn the history while they're there? Or, and the second part of that question is has anybody tried to book your location for an event, and once they learn the history, they say, yeah, not for me?
I've never had that happen. I did have a couple who ended the conversation. They had not booked yet, but who ended that conversation. They were like, yeah, it's just maybe a little too haunted for us. We do have the converse happen quite often, which is people want to be married here because of the haunted history. That happens much more frequently.
And when booking the events now, we're talking about weddings and other type of things, but let's talk about, because I'm sure you're a lightning rod for dozens or maybe hundreds of paranormal investigators that want to go ahead and do an investigation at your location. What are the, if you don't mind me asking, what are the definite rules that you give the investigators on what they can and can't do at your location? And do you research them before they come into your home?
So the only unbreakable ground rule for me is that you treat the entities who are here with respect. And I think there are multiple entities here. I think Mrs. Drish is the ghost, I don't know, spirit that we have the most interaction with.
She is the main character
Yes,
here.
I think she's here quite a bit, and DeAnna and I both feel that. But I also think there's we frequently feel the presence of one or two of the enslaved people that were here. I think they just really chiefly want to be remembered. We've had several investigators say that they had contacted Dr. Drish or had evidence that Dr. Drish was here as well. Sarah Drish and Dr. Drish, by the way, are buried about a mile away. Maybe not even a whole mile.
Yeah, maybe not even that
Yeah,
far.
really close. Really close. We've been to their graves multiple times. Catherine is frequently mentioned. She came back here to live as an adult. She has a little bit of a sad story. So she grew up in the house as Dr. Drish's daughter. And then in 1840, she had married, she had moved away. She came home and she lost her daughter, Cora, who had a fever and died, and gave birth to her third son, Edmund, within, I think, like a 6-week period, really close together. And after that, she was never quite right. Her husband brought her back here to live with her father and her stepmother, and she stayed here until her stepmother's death in 1884. So I think maybe she had like what we would call now postpartum depression, but she never was able to live with a husband again or away from her parents. I think she's still here too. She's a very gentle presence in the house.
With that being said, because I know you talked about earlier that you found some artifacts in the yard, some car parts or maybe tools of some sort. I'm sorry. What did you do with those artifacts? Did you keep them as a display, or did you donate to a museum, or did you just go ahead and put it in the cycle?
We keep them here. We anything that's sort of still intact enough to be displayed, we have here. We just kind of have a little collection of odd bits and things that we keep around. Mm-hmm.
So going back to when you mentioned that you purchased a home several years ago, so what was the attraction of you purchasing the home?
So, but both DeAnna and I have noticed this, so I don't think it's just me. But for us, the real evidence that this house is haunted or inhabited by spirits is that things we really need at the Drish House, things the house needs, just show up. And this happens like over and over again. DeAnna calls it Drish magic. It's like,
It is Drish magic.
It's just Drish magic. It just shows up.
It's so crazy how it just shows up.
Yeah. Things that we need, like we had this really strange plumbing problem, and it was actually a problem with the city sewer line. We weren't getting anywhere with getting it fixed. No kidding. The guy from down the street shows up at our door. We had never met him before. It's like, oh yeah, my friend Brandon can help you with that. We're like, it's just the weirdest thing. Like people come out of nowhere. And I put myself in that category. So my husband and I had done another old house, renovated another house. It was a little bit older than the Drish House, actually. It was built in 1834. It's also very interesting old house. And we had finished that project and we're feeling pretty good about it. And we were approached by the Tuscaloosa County Preservation Society. And they said, hey, there's this other old house in Tuscaloosa that's really in danger of being condemned by the city and needs to be saved. And, we don't have the funding or the purpose for it. And so the first time I came to the Drish House, it was the flashlight tour. There was no electricity. There was no plumbing. There was no HVAC. The windows were boarded up. There were places upstairs where you couldn't put your weight because the joists had rotted through. There were piles of just stuff. I don't even know how to describe it, just junk. It was like a hoarder house. So you were like dodging these piles of stuff. And we still bought it. And we're like, why was that even an option? Why did we think this was ever a good thing to do? So the answer to your question is I can't tell you, but I think that's part of this house is things it really needs weirdly just show up. DeAnna's in that category too. She took that weird picture and then she still came to work here.
And I just kind of showed up one day and was like,
she just kind of showed up like, hey, do you need somebody to work here? We're like, oh my gosh, yes we do. And now she's like family.
That's some hell of dedication. My hat's off to you. Because I would have done the same thing too, because I kind of like that kind of things. So prior to purchasing Drish House or working for you there, did any of you have any paranormal experiences either growing up or as an adult prior to Drish House?
I have.
All right.
Tell your story.
Me and my mom go to Natchez, Mississippi every year, and we decided to take a ghost tour. And I'm not like a huge ghost person. I get scared really easily, but my mom and sister insisted that we do this, so I did it with them, and they took us into the old like jail, like in the basement, and they did the flashlight thing, and that flashlight turned on, and I was like, we got to leave. So that is my only experience, but coming here, I have experienced everything super organically. Like I have not gone looking for it at all because I've got to come to work here. And I'm here by myself sometimes, so I don't want to be.
Tell me about smelling the roses on the stairs. That was the funniest.
Oh, that is okay. So they had always told me about Mrs. Drish had a rose garden and it was beautiful. So when you smelled roses or florals, that was her like being around you. Well, I was like, whatever, I don't believe that. And then the first time at the house, after my grandmother had passed away, I smelled the roses.
So she's getting checked out. So she stopped on the stairs and her eyes got as big as saucers. And she looked at me and she said, I thought you always made this up.
And I feel like that was Mrs. Drish like giving me a hug, saying it's okay.
I think so too, saying it's okay. Your grandmother's over here with us. It's all right. I think so too.
So now you're a little more comfortable with the paranormal.
I am so comfortable here with it. Like if I went somewhere else, I'd be a little scared. But here, it's just so comforting.
And when your guests, because you've had thousands and thousands of people come in and out of your mansion and booking events, has anybody called you back or emailed you back and say, hey, I couldn't really tell you during the event. I didn't want anybody thinking that I'm trying to ruin it, but has anybody emailed you and say, hey, this happened to me while I was here? I saw something. I don't know quite how to explain it.
We haven't had anybody email or call us back, but we've had a couple of people like, we had a groomsman recently who was like, I'm out of here and I'm never coming back again.
Wow.
So you can tell that story, DeAnna.
Yeah, my wedding was here in January, and my best friend's husband was upstairs with us at the end of the night. We were getting stuff, and he had I think it was an iron, and the cord was wrapped around it. And then all of a sudden, that cord came undone, and he was like, I am never coming here again. I am done. He would not come in the next day to help us get stuff out.
Like, I'm out of here. And then my version of that story is I have 4 sons. So my oldest son's girlfriend, they were here for Christmas break, and she had some work she had to do. She had to be on a conference call. And she's like, I'll just go to the Drish House and take my computer. It'll be nice, it'll be quiet because we were closed for Christmas, and I'll just work there. We're like, okay. And so my husband and I came back about 4:30 because, it gets dark early in December. And we're like, Sue, do you want us to take you home? Do you need us to stay with you? It started getting dark outside. She's like, no. Like, I'm a New Yorker. I'm fine. It's not freaking me out. No kidding. Like 20 minutes later, she's calling us. She's downstairs outside waiting. She wouldn't even come back upstairs to get her computer. We had to come back up and get it for her. She has not come back since. She was like, nope, that's it. I'm like, okay, we'll go upstairs and get your computer. And sometimes things happen that still kind of freak us out. We were closing down from a high school dance. So we were the only people still in the house, and the floor lamp downstairs in the little lounge area started just going crazy. It's like blinking. So I told DeAnna, I was like, okay, I will go over and unplug this lamp. You stand right there. And then we're leaving. And I reached down, I unplugged it, and then it blinked one more time.
We were like, okay, we're done.
Okay, we're out of here.
We'll get out of here. You're done.
We're done.
And it's funny too, how the story of Mrs. Drish is, the fire, but I think she's figured out electricity, because we'll shut the place down, turn all the lights off, and we'll come back the next day, and like the lights will be on in certain places, and especially on the bride side with the mirrors. You have to like use warm human touch to like turn them on.
They're like touch screen.
Oh, wow.
We got mirrors, and they will be on, or that one little teapot lamp in the tower. Those are the 2 things she likes that will be on, and we will just absolutely know, like, we turn off all the lights. That's not before we go. And then our neighbors at Prestige Limousines, they're just across the street. They see things all the time. They'll tell us, they're like, at night after y'all have left, like if drivers are working late or we're working late, they're like, lights come on and off. We've seen window shades go up and down. So Barry and his...
Oh my gosh, what? So from across the street, they saw the shades come up and down?
Yes.
Yeah.
And those are not like easy shades
They're
to
not.
like, they're like heavy.
They're cloth Roman shades, right? They're not roller shades.
So that's crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy.
So it's not because the HVAC came on, the air conditioner, the heater moved them. This is actually just going up and down. Oh, wow.
Yeah,
It says, shades, you have to pull a cord still. That's old-timey shades.
Wow. So, I was doing a little more research. All right, let's go way back to the beginning of the story. Something happened, and correct me if I'm wrong, because the facts could be wrong, as they sometimes often are. There was some sort of snafu or some sort of controversy during the funeral when I believe there was an issue either with a candle or I don't know what went on during the funeral. I don't know if it was the families fighting amongst each other and how the funeral was going to be conducted. What can you tell us anything about that?
I can. That's the story that's in 13 Allegos and Jeffrey. So I want to preface it by saying, I have a master's degree in history, so I feel like I have to say, like, I really don't have any primary source material for this, but I don't have any evidence it's not right either. So Dr. Drish died, like I said, in 1867. Mrs. Drish conducted his funeral at home, which would have been typical of the era in any part of the country, not just the South, and burned large candles around his coffin. That also was really typical. People burned candles around coffins for a couple of reasons. One was that it was the custom at the time to have a vigil with the dead person, so they were never left alone. When they usually had them in the parlor displayed the night before the funeral, and someone stayed up with the body. So you had candles for that reason. The other, which might be more relevant to the South than other areas of the country, is, in the heat, dead bodies start to putrefy pretty fast. And so the candles were also there just kind of dispel the smell, right, of decay. She asked that those candles be saved and used at her funeral. So I don't have any evidence that the Drishes had anything other than a loving marriage. Dr. Drish was sued in court in Alabama one time for seducing a young woman. We can talk about that later. But they were for a really long time. So I think of it as sort of a loving gesture that she wanted these candles. She lived another 17 years. And so no one could come up with the candles. This does not surprise me because I frequently can't find things I had this morning in my house. And so she lights them for herself in the tower. That's the story, is the death lights in the tower are the flames of these candles that she lights for herself.
Wow, and I'm glad that you could definitely tell me more about that story. Somebody just made that up. And for the listeners of Let's Find Out that want to know more about the history of the Drish House and possibly maybe go out there and to an event and plan a wedding or maybe do an investigation, what are the best ways to contact you and find out more information on how to do that?
Well, you can always go to our website, which is historicdrishhouse.com. You can follow us on Instagram or TikTok at Drish_house or on Facebook at the Historic Drish House. So we're easy to find out there on the web.
Excellent. I know I can see you on Facebook as well. So with that being said, thank you so much for being on the show. I learned a lot from both of you. And then I'd like to have you come back maybe later this year or next year, because I know there are going to be things that are going to be happening.
Oh, yeah.
And if you don't mind logging those down and sharing them on the show with us, I would love that.
We will be glad to.
Yes.
Thank you, my friends. This has been another excellent episode of Let's Find Out with Diego. Please check us out on all our social media, YouTube, and we're also on Rumble. Like, share, and subscribe. Also, Let's Find Out is now on KGRA Digital Broadcasting. Catch the show on Saturdays at 2 a.m. For more information, please visit KGRADB.com. That's KGRADB.com. Thank you for taking this journey with me. Until next time, my friends.
All content for Let's Find Out is property of CoHostDiego and is served directly from our servers with no modification, redirects, or rehosting. All celebrity impersonators are paid performers. The impersonated celebrities do not endorse or promote any views or opinions expressed by our guests, CoHostDiego, or Let's Find Out. The information shared on Let's Find Out is provided on an as-is basis, with no guarantees of completeness, accuracy, usefulness, or timeliness.